All right, I'd like to call to order the March 10th, 2025 school board meeting at 5 p.m. Ms. Marsan, take the roll.
Yes, Mrs. Bell is absent currently, but she's on her way. Mrs. Fairgrieve?
Here.
Mr. Kuchert?
Here.
Mr. Lentz?
Here.
Mrs. McCabe?
Here.
Mr. McNally?
Here.
And Mr. Lackner is currently absent, but on his way.
Okay, please stand for the pledge.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Can I have a motion to go into closed session for the purpose of the appointment, employment, compensation, discipline, performance, or dismissal of specific employees, specific individuals who serve as an independent contractor in a park, recreational, or educational setting, or specific volunteers of the public body or legal counsel for the public body, including hearing testimony on a complaint lodged against an employee, a specific individual who serves as an independent contractor in a park, recreational, or educational setting, or a volunteer of the public body, or against legal counsel for the public body to determine its validity.
So moved.
Second.
Ms. Marsan, please take the roll.
Mrs. Fairgrieve?
Yes.
Mr. Kuchert?
Yes.
Mr. Lentz?
Yes.
Mrs. McCabe?
Yes.
Mr. McNally?
Yes.
And Mr. Lackner to go into closed session.
Yes.
Okay.
Motion carries 1, 2, 3, 4, 7, 0, 6, 0. Fantastic.
All right.
The board is now back in open session at 6:02 PM. Ms. Marsan, can you please take the roll?
Yes, Mrs. Bell is here. She just stepped away for a moment. Mrs. Fairgrieve?
Here.
Mr. Kuchert?
Here.
Mr. Lentz?
Here.
Mrs. McCabe?
Here.
Mr. McNally?
Here.
Mr. Lackner?
Here. That brings us to item 4 on the agenda, reports to the board. Dr. Gordon will offer his superintendent's report. Dr. Gordon, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Lackner. I would like to invite up Mr. Richter first to come on up. We have a state champion that we want to recognize. We have a gymnast we want to recognize. We have our athletic director that we want to recognize from East. So, Mr. Richter, I'm going to hand the microphone over to you as you have some work to do here.
Sure,
in
sure.
recognizing amazing greatness at East.
Yes, well, thank you so much for the opportunity to be here to celebrate the accomplishments of our athletes and our staff members. First and foremost, as Dr. Gordon said, we had a wrestler who won first place in state for the second year in a row. His name is Dom Monaretto, and I'd like to invite Jason Potter up here as his coach to maybe talk a little bit about Dom's season and then bring him up to recognize him. So here's Coach Jason Potter.
First, thank you for having us tonight to honor Dom. Dom, not only did he win another state title this year, but he's a 3-time finalist, 2-time world champ, and he kind of just keeps raising the bar for himself. So this year, I think it's 156, is that right? He had his 156th win as a varsity athlete. To kind of put that in perspective, not that I'm old, but back in the 90s, if you got to 100, it was like amazing. So we had this very short list of wrestlers that wrestled at St. Charles that hit that 100 mark, and it used to be a badge of honor. And we had to get a new sign for him to take a picture with because he hit 150. So he's on pace with not only hitting 200 at this rate, which would be insane, but he's doing this on an insanely difficult schedule. We wrestle a national schedule. We travel all over the country. We go out seeking the best opponents possible. And Dom is not just winning, but he is dominating them. So we wore shirts that said "Dominate" on them with Dom because we thought that was very clever. His grandpa's got one on. So that was kind of the motto, and he fulfilled that. He teched his way through the state tournament, getting 25 takedowns and giving up 0. So not only did he win another state title, but he did it in one of the most dominant fashions in Illinois wrestling history. And quite frankly, we look forward to him doing it again. So we're going to try to find challenges for him in the future, but it's getting more difficult and making my job harder to find him competition, but we're going to keep doing it the best we can. So congratulations, Dom, and thank you for honoring him.
Dom, you want to step up to the mic?
Something?
Just say
Thank you for honoring me today.
You're welcome. What's it like to be a national champion, a state champion?
I mean,
Oh, world champion. I apologize. That's my bad.
it's awesome. It's great to see my work go towards something because, people see the accomplishments, but they don't see the behind the scenes. All the work you have to put in on the side and everything. It's just great to be honored.
I love that. When did you start wrestling?
When I was 5 years old.
5.
Yeah.
Was that just with your brother and you hurt him so badly? He's in an arm cast over here. Yeah, was that later? Wow, very impressive.
Thank you.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Thank you again. Next, I'd like to recognize our athletic director who is being inaugurated into the Illinois Sports Hall of Fame. Did I get that correct? So we are very pleased and excited to have Mr. Darren Howard as our athletic director for this year. He joined us from Oswego School District 308, where he was already not only a well-recognized athletic director in the state, but also a nationally recognized athletic director, winning Athletic Director of the Year nationally just the year before. So Darren, again, brings a wealth of expertise and knowledge to us here at St. Charles East, and I know with his partnership in D303, really just an opportunity for us to continue to take what we're doing already, capitalize on what's been going well, but then also elevate that to the next level. So I don't know if Darren wanted to come up and, just, let you guys know that he's really enjoyed his time here, and we've been really, again, just so pleased to have him on staff here at St. Charles East.
Thank you, sir. Well, Jim said I would be the athletic director for this year. I hope it's longer than that, but just thank you. Thank you for honoring me tonight. It was quite a surprise to get this honor when I got the phone call for this. And, you don't do this job for the honors. You just do the job the way you believe it should be done. And I've been really fortunate in my career to have some great mentors and work with some really, really, really great people. I'm thrilled to be in St. Charles. It's been fantastic so far. You got a really good one across the river there, and that young man as well. So good things ahead. And this is the most dominant, incredible wrestler I've seen in 33 years. So that kid is something special right there. Wow. Thank you.
Yeah, Mr. Howard, Darren, I just so appreciate your work, your commitment to excellence at East, but also across the river. I know Mr. Benoit's going to come up here in a second because I gave away his gymnast to East, so I apologize about that. That was
That's
on me.
okay. Don't worry about it.
You're taking those. But I've just appreciated getting to know you this year in your professionalism, your dedication to St. Charles East, but also District 303. It's been a real privilege of having you within our district, and thank you for that, and congratulations to that induction. Oh.
So I have a granddaughter who's a freshman at East, and you had a speech that you said to the families about how many of you have been high school athletes, and they raised their hand, and then how many of you were in the college athletics, and a few are, how many are you professional, and no one raised their hand. All three, the mom, dad, and my granddaughter all came home and told me separately how important that was to them, that it was about skills and making kids feel good, and it's about teaching and learning. It isn't about making a big splash in the pool. But so I wanted to tell you that that was an important speech, and I'm very grateful that you
Thank you.
were there.
Nicely done.
Thank you very much.
All right. And like Dr. Gordon said, Mr. Benoit, our athletic director from St. Charles North, will come on up and recognize the athlete from gymnastics.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Richter. And I want to echo that with regards to Mr. Howard. It's been fantastic to work alongside him this year and partner with him, and to seek his guidance and mentorship throughout the year has been fantastic. I look forward to many more years working alongside Mr. Howard. Excited to be here tonight to talk about a couple of awesome student athletes from St. Charles North, and our gymnast is part of a co-op, so the success is shared cross river, which is really good. Tonight, first up, I want to talk about a young man, Thomas McMillan. He is just a sophomore. He most recently, and Coach Rooney will share some details, set an IHSA record in the 100 butterfly. This young man is absolutely incredible in the water, but what's more important is his leadership within our entire school community. He's a young man who is part of our student athlete leadership group. We meet monthly, and he has shared his experiences not only with his team, but also kids from across all of our programs, which has been outstanding as we continue to build and manifest a culture of what it means to be a North Star student athlete and what it means to be a District 303 student athlete. So without further ado, I'd like to bring up Coach Rob Rooney.
I have the honor today, first of all, to say congratulations, and what you have done in wrestling is impeccable. And for the words from Jason, who obviously had some very good accolades on his way, is teaching you, and you're obviously teaching him more, and that's important to have success there, but have someone who respects you and appreciates everything you do. And Darren, welcome to the community. It's great to have you here. I know that Oswego is a little further west and a little further south, but it's great to have you here in St. Charles, and Joe does speak very highly of you, so I'm looking forward to actually a meeting on Friday. I have the honor today to introduce Thomas McMillan. Thomas is a sophomore. Thomas broke a 13-year-old state record in the 100 butterfly set by a gentleman named by Connor Black, who ended up going on to Stanford and swimming at Stanford. Thomas is a young man who seeks perfection. He accepts responsibility when things maybe aren't going the exact way he wants to, but he learns from his mistakes and he learns from failures, but he hates to lose. And he's a very talented young man who was seated second going into the state finals on Saturday, and right from the get-go, if you saw the race, he took total command of it. And he did it by listening and applying his talents. As a coach, when you have someone who's very talented, you get out of the way and you guide when you can. And I'm sure that Jason has the same things with Dom. I learn a lot from Thomas, and I'm going to continue to learn a lot from Thomas. And I hope that next year I can be standing up here. He's about 9/10 away from the national record, so hopefully he can accomplish that. Thomas McMillan.
Hello. I'd like to thank the board for providing all these opportunities to my fellow student athletes.
You're welcome. Thomas, when did you start swimming?
When I was 7.
7. So what's your favorite race, stroke? What do you specialize in besides what you won or came in second in?
So definitely the butterfly, and then I like the 100 backstroke as well.
Love it. Too hard swims. But Thomas, congratulations. Thank you for what you brought to St. Charles North High School. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Next up, really excited if Rachel Nicasio could join me up here. Rachel's a senior this year at St. Charles North, and an absolutely incredible gymnast and student athlete. She led us to a conference championship, a regional title, a sectional title, and a 4th place finish overall at state, where she took 3rd on the beam and was 10th in the all-around. But as I said before with Thomas, she's much more than a gymnast at St. Charles North. She defines what it means to be a student athlete very clearly. Her support of all of our programs has earned her recognition as the IHSA Female Student Athlete of the Month for the month of January, which is a quite prestigious award, the highest award that the IHSA will give student athletes throughout the year. So we're incredibly proud of her, and I think it should be noted too that every day, 4th period, she comes down to the athletic office and serves as a teaching assistant, doing an internship here in the athletic department. If you follow us on social media, shameless plug, she creates a lot of the graphics that you see, whether they're schedule graphics or student celebrations or upcoming events. Rachel is behind many of those, and her work is absolutely incredible. She's somebody that it takes just an outstanding amount of initiative when she comes in. We provide her with a little direction, and not only does she take it and do a really good job with it, but she knocks it out of the park every single assignment that we give her. And we're excited to watch her continue to grow on her journey academically at the next level next year and beyond, and hopefully possibly a future athletic director here in District 303, because she is outstanding.
Wow.
Well, thank you, Mr. Benoit, and he's the athletic director as well. And thank you guys for recognizing me today.
You're welcome. So what's the best part of gymnastics for you? What drives you? Because that's another incredibly challenging sport to show up each and every day.
My team. I have to give my credit seriously all to my team and to my coaches. We look back at our pictures, and it's just after every routine, it's hugs and celebrations. And no matter how far I went, all of our team, our JV and varsity is very much together. So they've had my back this entire season. I couldn't have done it without them.
Thank you so much. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Where are you going to go to school? Sorry.
I'm like 99% on University of Illinois.
Woo!
And then,
and then, congratulations. and then start applying in D303 in 4.5
After that,
years.
Exactly.
Yeah, all right, I got it. I appreciate
you.
that. Thank you. Congratulations. And I'm not sure if this young person here is here tonight. Finn McCullough. He had a perfect score on the ACT. We reached out to him, so we want to make sure we recognize, because that doesn't happen every day. It's a pretty unique opportunity. So we just wanted to make sure Finn and his family were recognized for all of that hard work going into getting a perfect score on the ACT. He's over at North. Thank you. He's at North, and North Star. All right, with that, I think we are done, and I can hand it back over to you, Mr. Lackner.
Thank you, Dr. Gordon. Wow, that was one of the best superintendent reports that I've had the pleasure of listening to, so thanks, everybody, for that.
I won't take offense to that. It wasn't from me. Everybody go.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Please do feel free to go after the celebration. We have other business to attend to as a board, but thank you for your participation in the celebration up to now. That does bring us to board member reports on committee meetings. There was a combined L&T and Business Services meeting. Who's on point for that?
I'll give the business services parts of it. We had our normal presentation of both Mid-Valley and D303. No, we're on track there. Nothing to report. You will see tonight there is one item in the consent agenda for our Phase 2 equipment package for Munhall for our updates. And then we did get the readout from the AROI process for the multilingual program analysis. Turn over to you, Mr. Kusher.
Yeah, so as Mr. Lentz alluded to, we had a robust discussion regarding the academic return on investment process, or AROI for short, for the multilingual program. We strongly encourage everybody to go back, and if you have some time to review that, we will continue to engage in discussion this evening, but some of the critical things that we discussed last Monday were the case for the change, a cost analysis, the program model itself, and then we delved into some implementation and academic goals. So again, we will continue that discussion this evening, and we'll determine whether we have reached a consensus or to move forward for action.
Thank you, Mr. Lentz and Mr. Kuchert. That brings us to a DPTO. Is there an update there?
Pretty minor update. We met on the 19th of February at the St. Charles Library, and we will meet again on the 19th of March at the St. Charles Library. Mostly the discussion was about not our board, their relative PTO boards and nominations, and what that looked like. So of course, there's always resource sharing and idea sharing and fundraiser sharing, but they were also talking about how to bring in new members. There was a small portion of time that I stepped out for another discussion, and that had to do with some of the feedback that others were sharing regarding the League of Women Voters Forum that had happened recently. So I was not in the room for that. However, continue to really be amazed at all the amazing work that our PTOs do, and hoping that they can do a little more sharing with regards to increasing membership at their own various schools. A lot of them, and I remember from my own PTO days, it's really difficult to find volunteers, and so we were all kind of strategizing about how to go about possibly raising or bringing in new members for that, and lots of ideas sharing. So it's always a great experience.
Thank you for that update, Mrs. Bell. That brings us to item 5, citizen comments. Mr. Kuchert, we do have citizen comments. Can you please read the preamble?
You got it. So during the public comment period, members of the public body who wish to speak are asked to first state their name and the community in which they reside. Each individual will have up to 3 minutes to address the board on a topic of their choosing. We ask all individuals who address the board to do so with civility and respect towards others. Please note that personnel matters are sensitive and confidential. We also want to inform our speakers that all regular, special, and committee meetings are live streamed and available for viewing at any time on the district's YouTube channel. Personal information should be considered before making a statement that will be recorded and made public. While the board will not respond to today's public comment during this meeting, we are committed to listening to you to help support our work for the district and on behalf of our students, staff, families, and community members. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kuchert. Our first speaker is Terry McCann-Mikulski.
Good evening. My name is Terry McCann-Mikulski, and I'm a resident of St. Charles with 2 students in D303. I'm here to speak about the way the district is handling situations related to its most vulnerable and marginalized students. In this case, the multilingual students and students with disabilities. The dual language program has had its problems from the start, with poor planning, poor execution, and not enough support or enrollment. It was a grand idea with great intentions, but it focused on end goals and not on the steps to get the students and the districts to that end goal. And that seems to be a common theme. Our district has great ideas and great intentions, but it does not plan and implement them well. We focus on a goal and forget the details and forget to meet the students where they are at. So many students get left behind. This creates widening achievement gaps for marginalized groups like our multilingual students, IEP students, 504 students, lower income students, and other populations. We have to understand who our students are, what their needs are, and provide them all with a guaranteed and viable curriculum in all core areas. We need to understand the gaps and areas where supports are needed for students and staff. We need more transparency for families so that they can understand what is offered within the district as options for their students at every level. But most importantly, we need to plan better. We need to plan not only for the present, but for the future, so we can stop inflicting the same issues on our students and families year after year. We can't claim to value belonging and then constantly take students out of their school communities and shuffle them around, only to do it again the next year. And the students we are doing this to tend to be the most impacted by this type of change and stress. The ones who need stability, consistency, routine, structure. These are our marginalized students in special education, our low-income students, and our multilingual students. And of course, our teachers also have to bear the brunt of this change a lot too. We need to do better at supporting all students and staff, looking at and addressing their needs, developing a full multi-step plan that accounts for all the steps needed to actually address all of the goals and all of the steps of the plan. But also have a plan that it is in line with the students and families who are in our district. 23% of our district students have disabilities. This is not an insignificant number. 14% of our district students have IEPs, and 9% of our students are multilingual. Please just keep this in mind when planning. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. The next speaker is Jamie O'Brien.
Hi, my name is Jamie O'Brien, and this is my son, Harrison. We live in St. Charles. He is in school at Anderson, and I have another one at Munhall right now. Harrison has been in the school district for 6 years. He began in the early childhood 3-year-old preschool access program. Within those 6 years, he's been at 4 different schools. He started at Fearson, then moved to Fox Ridge, then Davis, and now where are you at? Anderson. A few years ago, when he attended Davis, he did not want to go to school. It was a real struggle every day to get him to go. Now he's so excited to go. When the program moved from Davis to Anderson, we were given the chance to either stay at Davis or move with his teacher to Anderson, and he chose to stick with his teacher and give Anderson a try. Since being at Anderson, he has made friends in the general education program, and he talks about those friends at home, and it's something he's never done before. We have such an amazing supportive experience with Mr. Jared, who sends videos of why he can't fix the light bulbs over winter break, and Mr. Mike, the custodian, who takes videos of himself actually fixing those light bulbs, which is a passion of Harrison's right now. Apparently, he's a pretty popular guy with the staff and the students. Inclusion, I know, is a push here in the district, and which is awesome, and it's one chapter in the book that we are reading is about fostering relationships. It is so important for kids like Harrison to foster relationships. It's hard for them to foster relationships. And if we continue to move them from school to school, they will have a harder and harder time fostering relationships with those general ed peers. Harrison, do you like Anderson?
Yes,
Why do you like it?
because it's so good. I love it because their teachers are nice.
And do you want to go to another school?
No.
There you go. Thank you.
Thank you for those comments, Harrison. I appreciate that. Can we have Mike Backer join us?
That's going to be a tough act to follow, right? How many individuals here have people in your lives been touched by disability? How many have actually observed or visited in the access programs?
Every day.
All yes, okay. Every day, exactly. Access at Anderson excels. I really think we should consider changing the name to Excel, to be totally honest. Wonderful staff. That's the main reason. But it starts with leadership with Mr. Jared. The staff is amazing. They bring it all together, and they provide the very best for our kids. They make them feel at home. Let's follow your own success indicators, the ones that you created in your strategic plan. Let's talk about success, attendance. Let's talk about academics, and let's talk about discipline. These kiddos are here 100% of the time. Your goal's 95%, right? Just missing a couple days. How many times do they have to go down to the office? I understand that the goal is like 2 times per semester or something. Check in on their IEPs. They're making incredible gains at their levels. So that's in place, and those are the strategic plan indicators that you've created, right? Collaboration, they invented collaboration. These are special educators. They believe in these kids, and they work very closely in the times that they do go out into the regular classrooms. It's all about collaboration, and I know that's an important thing as well. Cultural dignity, they're establishing that. They're setting their roots. They have that in place. Again, these are things that are happening because of leadership and staff support. That sounds like a very stable setting, doesn't it? Well, once again, we're here and we're considering removing them. This is the 3rd, 4th, 5th, whatever time in a row that we've talked about this. I really don't understand it. Some might say, on the lighter side, well, toughen up, you'll get through it, it'll build your perseverance, right? On the real negative side, the other extreme would be, is this educational malpractice to take away their opportunity? I find myself somewhere in the middle. I find myself at a place where I see this as you're interrupting my kids' academic progress. And you're flying right in the face of your own strategic plan. I know you're about accountability. You're always talking about the dashboard and looking at progress. These kids, this program's succeeding. This is a showcase program. It's working. Why are we fixing things that aren't broken? I respect your role. People come in all the time with complaints. I've got some solutions. Why don't we look at the possibility of a phasing program where we slowly, and so it won't disrupt the kids who are oldest at both schools, at both Anderson and Richmond, and phase program in, phase program out. Would we consider the possibility of art or music on a cart? Would we consider the possibility that maybe we could look at mobile, short-term rental in the back of Anderson so that kids can have, again, more space? I understand, I know it's a space issue. I've talked to Nate about that. The last thing I'll say, and I know my time's up, is that you did an incredible job. I read the report 2 times on the multilingual programming. It's a 50-slide report. I think it's wonderful. Congratulations to the students of the bilingual and multilingual program. Let me ask the parents one last question because my time's up. How would you like to have as meticulous a study, in-depth study on your kiddos who are impacted every day by autism and all the other disabilities that we're talking about? Wouldn't that be something if we had that kind of study for those kids as well? Something to think about. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Backer. That brings us to Colleen Backer.
I'm Colleen Backer. I live in St. Charles as well, with him. Hi, I'm Colleen Backer. I'm a parent and current educator at St. Charles North High School. Tonight, I'm speaking as a parent and a community member who is concerned about the pattern of reactive changes and lack of systemic planning in our district. There's a pattern of inconsistent implementation and follow-through. The amount of decisions that are made that come back to the voting table within a year is a pattern. The amount of different outside agencies used to analyze selective data is a pattern. We cannot keep making radical changes every year and expect to see positive results in an educational system. You developed a 5-year strategic plan. When you build your plan and then change the decisions, there's a domino effect. According to the 50-page analysis of the multilingual program, you are second-guessing your plan. The change would impact the Access program, a program for students with autism that continues to be uprooted instead of analyzed. These changes are referred to as unintended consequences. Our district strategic plan prioritizes inclusion with a core value of belonging and a culture of dignity. Inclusion is not something that happens magically. When we're talking about programming, we're talking about people. We're talking about humans. Here's a short summary of the changes in the last 2 years for the Access program. We were called the last week of school in 2023 to be told our son's teachers were being moved to Anderson School. We were told there would be 3 classrooms there the following year. That same year, they changed how they delivered specials to students in the Access program. My son Rory went from 7 students in PE to 50 students in PE. It was a very rough transition. In 2024, they decided to have 6 Access classrooms in 3 schools instead of 2 and move 4 of the 6 classrooms. They also changed program-related service providers. In 2 years, the Access students have gone to 3 brand new schools. And after such hard work and collaboration, we finally have authentic inclusion, only to be told there's not space for Access program at the Anderson School anymore. You see, your lack of systemic planning for inclusion is not magical, equitable, or dignified. True inclusion takes time, collaboration, and belonging for both staff and students. During the 2nd year of Anderson, our son Brogan joined the Run Club and band with decreased adult support. In January, our son Rory was invited to a birthday party by the sweetest little girl named Jillian. This little Girl Scout, adorable. I also think he might be in love with his PE buddy Claire, and they're going on a date to Chuck E. Cheese later this month. This is authentic inclusion, and it took time. You know what is magical? Anderson Elementary School. You know why? Because they are authentic, and Nate Jarrett is a humble leader who has created a true culture of dignity through his relationships with people. Our family feels so incredibly lucky every day sending our boys to the staff at Anderson. Hell, if more people took a little drive down to the valley, they'd want to go there too, because it is that magical. There's a major space issue. I get it. There isn't enough room for the Access program long-term at Anderson, and there should be a wait list, but that was your decision. Phase out the program if you need to. Support the 11 humans that have already dealt with so much change. Stop trying to pull a rabbit out of your hat like magic. It's harmful. I believe our students and staff are more than unintended consequences, and you should too. Thank you.
Christine Rush.
Hi, I'm Christine Rush. I live in St. Charles. I am not nervous speaking to you guys, but I do feel sick. I feel sick to my stomach that our kids have been just put in terms of dollars, and that there is zero transparency, there is zero advocacy for the Access program. The people who are in the positions to be telling us about potential changes that promised us just last year that even though we are going to sell your time short at Davis and move you to Anderson, and we promise you will be there until 5th grade, and your son will not have to go to another school. It's all just been demolished. And if you look at the amazing presentation that was given for the dual language program, all of that also applies to our children. And they are very, very underestimated. And they are very, very just, I'm sorry, I'm not even nervous being up here. I'm just so disgusted. Because we moved to District 303 6 years ago, before we even knew Dawson was autistic. And we moved here because it was supposed to be a really good school district. And now we're talking about putting Dawson in a 3rd school in just 3 years. These kids, like the backer said, I mean, they nailed it. These kids aren't just some sort of side effect from another program you decide to move again. They're real. This is Dawson. He loves Anderson. And Nate, you play into that 100%. He did not like going to Davis. I told you today, Mr. Gordon, why. There was a lot of bullying there. Nothing was done. Also, what I did witness is something that really should be told. One of the times, with me present after school on the playground while he was being bullied, been called the R word, saying, "You talk funny, I don't want to play with you, I don't like you." He has a hard time communicating. He couldn't say, "Can I play your game of tag?" He just joined in, and they just got on him several times. But there was one time, there was a little girl named Vivian from his class the year before, Gen Ed, not the current year, the year before. She took his hand. She said, "Dawson, come play with me." And she put a smile on his face. We need these kids to be able to have these relationships that carry over from year to year. And the sad thing is, our population is kind of small. The classrooms are kind of small. But some of their best friends are their teachers, are their therapists, and we keep uprooting these children. Not even to mention how long it takes to create that really great relationship. It's almost a full school year. I know my time is up. I do want to ask one quick question. I know only one of you have been in the Access program classroom. Who else plans to go? To just observe. Who's open to that? 1? 2? Okay. And who is going to show up for the meeting on March 19th? The Access family meeting. It can't just be Dr. Gordon. Who of you who's going to vote on this is going to show up to that meeting so you can hear from all the families? Amen. Raise of hands. Dr. Gordon already sent you the invite. I'll make sure he sends it again to make sure it's at the top of your list. I also sent you a letter. I want to make sure you guys read it. Thank you.
That concludes our citizen comments and brings us to item 6 on the agenda for discussion regarding the multilingual program.
Thank you, Mr. Lackner. If the team would come up, take their seat. To our parents, students, and family members whose children are in the Access program, thank you for coming out. Thank you for your advocacy. No decision on Access around a program placement has been made. We will continue to have those conversations, but I look forward to sitting with our parents on March 19th, as well as some other staff members as well. So thank you for that. Tonight, board, this is an opportunity to, as I get my clicker going here. Again, our core values of belonging, perseverance, and achievement, as we discussed last time. Our strategic priorities of effective collaboration, instructional coherence, and a culture of dignity. Tonight, we're going to review responses to board member questions at the end of our meeting last Monday night. Update the board on proposed construction at Richmond, and then recommend elementary multilingual program service delivery models as well. We'll follow up on the responses to the board member questions. I feel like sorry. So to our timeline. We reviewed this at our last meeting. Again, the November 13th started this conversation. March 11th, engaging with the DM group. The August 26th, positive construction. December 16th, 2024, review of the AROI study design, where we brought forward the success criteria, the student segments, and the fully loaded cost. March 3rd, a week ago, where we shared our recommendations with the board, and then tonight, back tonight to answer any further questions the board may have. So tonight, we're going to start with answering some of those questions. Dr. Tracy Taylor Moore will start us off. Tracy?
All right, good evening. So I have a couple of these slides, just want to follow up in regards to what support for our students and staff would look like in the collaborative TBE model. If you'll recall, the collaborative TBE model would be proposed at Anderson as well as at Munhall. Question was, how do bilingual resource specialists and EL resource teachers support students and staff in the collaborative model? Again, if you'll recall, the bilingual resource specialists would be acting and serving similarly to our current EL resource teachers, with the addition of being bilingual certified to provide that native Spanish instruction to our students who would benefit from that, who are identified as full-time TBE students. And so for our student support for our multilingual learners and our non-multilingual learners, that really looks at native language or EL support during literacy and math. They're both, you could call them under the same umbrella of English as a second language supports, one being that ESL support in English and one being that ESL or language development support in Spanish. Also building academic vocabulary and background knowledge. We know that our students probably come in with a wealth of knowledge in their native language, and that we'd like to be able to capitalize and leverage what they know and make bridges to English to support that learning in English as well. And then differentiated support based on language and academic needs. Not all of our students will need that Spanish support. Some of our students would benefit from additional support that's offered in English. So we'll have the flexibility of providing that support in Spanish and English with us having bilingual resource specialists as well as EL resource teachers. As far as teacher support, the idea is to co-plan and co-teach with the classroom teacher. So again, both of these teachers would be providing instruction. It's really going to be imperative that the teachers work in collaboration and have that planning time to think through thoughtfully what are the things that will best make the lesson successful for students in terms of ability to acquire the language needed to understand the content standards, and then as well address the actual standards themselves. It'll be additional educator support to provide small group instruction. So again, you're looking at the classroom teacher. During small group instruction, they might have a group of 5 or so students. That teacher may or may not speak Spanish themselves. You would have a bilingual resource specialist who'd be able to provide small group instruction to a group of students who might need that Spanish support. And then again, active member of grade level PLCs. We just can't stress enough how important a collaboration is across the building, especially when the collaborative model is predicated on the bilingual resource specialist supporting multiple grade bands. So this would really lead to increased collective knowledge and clarity of effective lesson design for multilingual learners. What is it that our students really need, and how do we plan our lessons to make sure that that happens?
And board will do this a little bit differently tonight because each slide is really a set of questions from the board. So we'll just stop here. If there are any questions on the collaborative TBE model or any of the models, Tracy or the team will be happy to answer your questions.
I had a question about the, because the teachers have been isolated, the bilingual teachers have been isolated, and I wanted to be sure that we were providing enough support for them to do PLC work together with the gen ed teachers as well. Can you speak a little bit about what they've experienced as we have taken on the PLC work, and what more might they need to be able to really collaborate?
Sure. So as far as math goes, they have collaborated with other gen ed teachers as well. So we all use the same written math curriculum. As far as language arts goes, they have had a different curriculum resource. So they're not unfamiliar with the PLC process, and that they've had that opportunity to collaborate across math. And with Wonders, we are looking to have professional development for our teachers that have been in the dual language program, to make sure that they're feeling efficacious and set up to make sure that our students can get the best instruction from them with the Wonders resource.
Mr. Buxton, anything?
Yeah, I would just adding a little bit to what Dr. Taylor Moore indicated. This year in our dual language program, math has been taught exclusively in English. And so the educators are, as she said, using the same resource. So when I've been in PLCs, the dual language teachers are present for the math PLCs with the grade level teams.
Any other questions? Oh, sorry.
Yeah, just one additional one to build on that point about the current multilingual teachers that are bilingual in Richmond. We also have in the proposed plan teachers running the collaborative TBE model in Munhall and Anderson. You talk a little bit about the training for the current multilingual teachers. What's the plan for those teachers who will now be executing the collaborative TBE model in those other schools?
Yeah, so thank you for the question. We are, as part of our up is the instructional design protocol that we will be utilizing across our classrooms to make sure that teachers understand how do I have language objectives and how do I have content objectives, and to make sure that both of those are present for students, because there's the content and then there's the language of the content that you have to be able to have command of as well. So that requires intensive and intentional design in the professional learning. And the SIOP model is an 8-pronged model that we're looking at starting our first iteration of implementers in April for our coaches and our specialists to be those first people that can support the rest of our teachers as we continue to get training undergoing for the rest of the staff.
And just one quick, it's more of a comment, maybe a little bit of a question, but I want to clarify the resources are going to be then, we're able to keep the resources the same throughout the entire grade level, regardless of if they're in the TBE program or not.
That's correct.
And so that'll make transition or collaboration between those teachers easier.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Okay, we'll move on to the next slide.
Did you skip one?
Did I skip? Did I do that? Yes, I did.
Yeah.
There you go. Thank you.
So question had come up, but how do we monitor our multilingual students as they transition from one grade band to the next? So we wanted to make sure that we came back and provided that information to you. So this slide is talking about for our students who are 5th graders and transitioning into 6th grade. For both bands, you'll see similar information on the next slide. Our teachers have spring meetings in which they meet with the case managers of the current 5th grade students to discuss those incoming students, understand what their present levels are, their general background, for actives, which are currently enrolled multilingual learners, as well as our monitored students, and those are students who are monitored for 2 years after having exited bilingual services. So the notes are conveyed to grade level teams at the beginning of the year, and they're referred back to as needed throughout the year. We use our Schoology platform to have all of that accessible to everyone at any time. And then the following school year, core content area teachers are the ones that fill out those monitoring forms, and they track students' proficiency across the 4 language domains: listening, speaking, reading, and writing at the end of each semester. And it looks very similar at the high school level.
Can I ask a question
please,
now?
please.
So 2 questions. So the ML case manager, is that a specific role just for that, or are they actually?
So that's who the EL resource teacher is, the current EL teacher. So they serve as the case manager of record, so to speak.
Okay.
But it's
and-
not a separate position.
And then, so at the middle school, so what's their caseload for that? Do we know?
What's the caseload at the elementary, or what's the caseload
At middle school, so for the EL resource teacher who will be the multilingual case manager as well, what's their?
So we have a EL teacher at each grade for 6th grade, 7th grade, and 8th grade, and so that's kind of how that's divided up.
Okay, we don't know how many each of those have to monitor per grade level?
So the ratio we utilize is 30-1. I'd have to look and see how many each has at their current enrollment, but our ratio is 30-1.
Okay. And then my other question, so the core content areas, they fill out the monitoring forms to track the progress, and then what are the actions that are taken? Like, is there a documented process as far as what we do to action what's documented?
Yeah, so the teachers, and that's kind of goes on the high school one where they kind of went into more specifics around this, but what the teachers do is check back with the core content teachers check in with the EL resource teacher and say, here's what we're noticing. The EL teachers also have access to that in our elevation platform where they can see if a student has a failing grade, if a student is falling behind, and to check in and have routine meetings. We need to become more systematized in our meetings. I will say that in terms of how do we guarantee that we're checking in. But the system itself is designed for anybody to be able to go into the elevation platform to see the grades that are present and then to check in with each other in terms of what might need to be the support, especially for our students who are that first year out of being exited from the program. So they've just become non-MLs. We want to make sure that we keep the support there that they need.
So is that something then that is on the list, so to speak, as this moves forward, that we're going to have a more robust middle school?
Yes, that would be
program?
what I would like to do.
Okay, thank you.
Anything else on the high school piece? Oh, I apologize.
So it's very similar in nature. The articulation EL teachers, as I was saying, each grade has an EL teacher that represents them. Usually takes place between April and May, and then that following school year, the teachers fill out the monitoring forms. What I will say for high school is, to Mrs. Fairgreave's point, that exited students at high school are checked in every 9 weeks by the EL teachers. So that's something we'd want to look at doing for middle school because, again, we don't have something quite that systematized there. But if that failing grade is seen, the EL teachers reach out to the core content area teachers for an update and to better understand.
Dr. Taylor Moore, when we talked last about this, we had a section about results measures, and we talked a lot about tracking the academic successes of those students who have passed out of the access test, meaning they've achieved their goal of 4.2 or 4.8, whatever the number was. In your last conversation with Ms. Fairgrieve, you started to mention that period of transition from being qualified for ML services versus testing out. Can you talk a little bit more about that first year, not from a results tracking standpoint, but how we treat individual students who have successfully tested out of that 4.8 or achieved that 4.2, whatever that number is? How do we treat those students in the year following that positive outcome?
So it's a 4.8 is the overall proficiency that they need. We have a part of our system, we have our spreadsheet that lists all of our active students and all of our monitored students so that it's in everyone's mind's eye at the same time, so we don't have them lose off our radar, so to speak. So for those monitored students, you're taking a look at what are those proficiency levels? Overall, yes, you can reach a 4.8, and there's also some subcategories that you have to be proficient meet as well in the specifically the literacy. But for our speaking and listening, you could have a lower level of proficiency and still exit. So we need to kind of take a look at that and make sure that we understand what are the things that the students really have command of, what are the potential gaps for them, and then those conversations are what's so imperative, because the EL teachers understand that and have that lens. Need to make sure, like I was saying, that we have a more systematized approach so that the core content teachers know what those potential areas that they need to lean into a little bit more.
Thank you for that.
Thank you.
I was just going to chime in briefly about that, because we've talked about some of the ways that we can improve these processes. How quickly do you think that we can make some of the changes that you're discussing here with these check-ins, the frequency of these check-ins? How quickly should we shift to this model? Do you think that we'll see some real improvement, not only in the midst of the programming, but as they transition to the various levels throughout their educational experience here? Is this something we see immediate, short term?
I would say it's definitely needed to start right away for us to get, as I'm a big systems person, so the more that we can be in line and have a clear pathway to what we'd like to have our students achieve, the better. So I think if we started with this, we would definitely see some gains in the fact that we're building our collective efficacy. We're building the opportunity for our teachers to learn from each other and to know what it is that our EL teachers do really well and our core content area teachers do really well. So every time that we're able to have more of those conversations, we're able to increase the likelihood of us having that success faster.
I wondered if we could collect the data and have that, I'm looking at David, and have that be part of the monitoring and how successful our kids are in the 2 years after they've exited the program, so we can see actually what the results are and if we're maintaining.
Oh, we could definitely do that.
Board, are you comfortable moving on? Next slide. Okay, Ms. King.
Okay, tonight I'd like to share the updated implementation and academic success criteria. We've responded to both board questions and also incorporated teacher feedback. The L&T team met on March 7th, met with a group of teachers, specialists, and also administrators to get feedback on both types of goals. So we accelerated that process so that we could bring those goals to you tonight. Many of the criteria on the slides you have seen before in our presentation last week, but tonight I'd like to highlight some of those changes for you. So if we look at our implementation success criteria, we've rearranged those in order of when we will see that. So it's a different presentation tonight, so you can see that by a time format. One change the feedback team recommended was professional learning about the access assessment and learning about the WIDA language framework. So our teachers would like to know more about how to combine that academic content with the language goals. In addition to that, we want this professional learning to include, they asked for how to understand that progress towards proficiency that we talked about last week, that is our ISB accountability measure. We have also had accountability, that's the accountability measure used by ISB. We also have added training that the teachers asked for on our data and instructional strategies tool, Elevation. So that was one of the things that Dr. Taylor Moore just talked about, and our teachers have asked for more instruction on how to use Elevation to actually set language goals after they understand the WIDA framework, and as well as the access testing requirements. So again, our implementation success criteria are our adult actions that will lead to increased student learning outcomes. All right, and so I'm going to move on. Dr. Gordon, could you take us to our academic success criteria? A change in our academic success criteria was requested through the board to do some monitoring earlier than just our mid-year iReady assessment. So we have used classroom assessments. In the first trimester, we will evaluate the performance of all Spanish-speaking multilingual students on the Common District Assessments in math with Eureka Math Squared, and on reading comprehension and wonders for grades 3 through 5. For our primary learners, we will increase the rate of monitoring for the foundational skills assessments. That includes phonemic awareness, phonics, and reading fluency. These are the levers that will get us skilled and fluent readers by 3rd grade and in English proficiency. So that was an important addition, meeting with teachers and talking to administrators. I want you to know that our math assessments occur every 6 weeks, so we will have updated data in 6 weeks, and our Wonders assessments are approximately every 7 weeks. So we will continue to provide those updates in all 3 trimesters, and you'll see as we go through the trimester plan that we expect increased levels of proficiencies for our students as we move through the school year. Okay. Because of the change to English proficiency, this proposed program model of going from biliteracy to English proficiency, the beauty is that all of our students and teachers will be using the same curriculum materials. So we will have that guaranteed and viable curriculum as well as that PLC process in place. So we're building one coherent system of instruction and assessment that will be supported by our PLC process. We've already been monitoring, analyzing, and reporting to the board on our common district assessments this year. So we will continue to do that, but now all of our multilingual students will be part of that same process. We can include all learners, and we will examine the disaggregated data. And I think we can, let's see, if you can go back, I'm sorry, I'm jumping around here. If we look at that second bullet under trimester 3, you were asking how we will monitor our former MLs, and we do have goals for year 1 and year 2. So all of our year 1 Spanish-speaking former multilingual learners, we're going to ask that they achieve stretch growth goal by the end of the year May I Ready assessment. And we know from analyzing our data now for 5 years with I Ready, if students can achieve that stretch growth for 3 years in a row, they will be at grade level proficiency. So we know that is extremely important, that we keep our eye on the target and our goal for those students that have exited the program. Okay. So in addition, we talked about adding the classroom assessments, but we will continue to monitor our high-stakes accountability assessment from IAR, as well as our iReady assessments. We can see that the percentage of students in math and ELA, we are looking for increases there because of our professional learning and our programming. And we have also added the addition of not only looking at that 3rd grade reading level that's so important, we're going to measure that year to year in 3rd grade, but we are also added a cohort measure. So we're going to look for growth from the same set of students from 3rd grade to 4th grade to 5th grade. And that was one of the things that our educators really valued, that focus on growth for our students. And then responding to another board question, we also expect, you can see in that last bullet, that national average growth will be greater than average for our D303 students.
Board, any questions on academic or implementation success criteria?
Just a comment, I appreciate the cohort point. Can you talk a little bit more about what's being measured amongst that cohort? As I read the words, it's a 5% change for the cohort, but a 5% change in what part of the IAR measurement?
So it would be for math and reading. And I didn't set specific goals yet. The team couldn't because we would like to use our most recent data from 2025. So we are looking for.
So is it, but is it the percent that meet or exceed the IAR standard? Is that it?
Yes. The percent of students that are proficient.
I think it's important since students are going to schools where ML students have not been, and it will have an impact on the overall school results. Is there a way, as you look at the success criteria, that it can be presented in a form so families of students who are not MLs will see that this is a good place, the program's working, even though they aren't English proficient yet, the growth. Is there a way we can make sure? I'm concerned that this can be.
Ms. McCabe, this is what I asked for in the last meeting, for it to be disaggregated.
I'm asking for something more than
Okay.
disaggregated, because I think it has to be community is really important. And what I have seen in my career is that when we find that our school is not performing at the highest rate, we look at, oh, those students aren't performing, when they really are growing. They just can't do the IAR in English yet. I think that's a piece that we don't tend to celebrate. We tend to look at it as a problem. I think the same thing could be said also about our students who are in special ed, that we need to celebrate that growth. So if there is some way that that could be considered, so that when children are growing and learning, it is a celebration, even if they don't hit the targets that native English speakers.
I think we can continue to do that, and we haven't done a good job of communicating those growth measures and our successes. I know that Lisa Simon-Sally-Lulek at Richmond has done a great job of that at Richmond. They have always disaggregated their data from the monolingual classrooms and the bilingual classrooms, and they've celebrated growth across the school. So we could make that more intentional, that it's also celebrated within the community.
The question I have, so when we talked about this last time, we talked about the attrition in the program, right? And the amount of students that get added or that were added in. Kind of going over this, it kind of struck me as like, okay, is there some way for you guys to show us the new students that have been added or other things? Because again, those students are going to come in at not the proficiency level that we're expecting kids who have been in the program for a number of years, right? Mm-hmm. So that's been one thing that's kind of been playing with my mind a little bit about like, okay, with this huge attrition rate that we were seeing, how are we going to be able to analyze that and actually look at the program as a whole?
Yeah, Mr. Lynch, I think that's a really important question and one that was shown up on that data chart around the mobility rate, but the add-in rate, especially what we added in there, how many years they've actually been in the program, and you saw some of those. I think that last year is roughly, don't quote me on this, 15% first year in fifth grade. That's a very different academic conversation and around the academics that we can do a better job of articulating. When do young people come into the program? How are they growing and what are they doing? Mr. Cesar, anything you would add on to that?
No, okay. You're right, we can. I think there's two things into that, just to get a little bit in the weeds. There's number of years in D303, and then this is also a population that tends to have more newcomer status. So it's by, so it's by years in and then by years in U.S. schools, and there's other things we can do about it. All of that's getting planned and put together.
Yeah, I mean, I think just at a minimum, that what I'd like to see is because again, we haven't seen the attrition until we did the analysis, right? And I do have appreciation for the comments, right? We want to do this type of analysis for every program, right? But I'd love to see in there what the attrition rate is and what the move in or, that rate is as well. Just so that as a board member, we can look at it and say, okay, what does this mean? And then be able to ask some deeper questions there.
Yeah, thank you for that. Other questions in the academic or success indicators? Okay.
Okay, so
Yeah, sorry.
Struggling
over here with
So we're going to go a little bit deeper into 3 of our buildings and talk about the impact on space considerations of the model that is recommended. We're going to start with Richmond. Richmond, when you look at the side-by-side comparison of this current school year versus what the model would be for next year, you're not going to see anything jump off the page as far as needing significantly more space. Again, you're looking at a 21 classroom building with 6 of those classrooms currently being used for the 3-5 one-way dual language program with the model we're recommending of the in-classroom, 1 in-classroom per grade level. You're going to see, okay, it kind of 6 and 6, we're coming out to 18 core sections. You're going to still have your 3 spaces for your elective. I think what's probably a bigger deal and a bigger thing to consider at Richmond is just that inadequacy of the auxiliary space. And this has been a long-standing component to the Richmond building. This is not something that's new or directly tied to the programming model that we're recommending. So what do I mean when I say inadequate auxiliary spaces? Those are some of those flexible collaborative spaces that our teachers and teams can use to do small group instruction, to do different. If I'm in a model where I might have some English and some Spanish happening in the room at the same time, and that's going to cause a distraction, and we might have a physical barrier but not a sound barrier. I'm going to need some flexible collaborative space to make sure that all of our students get that nice learning environment to be able to really lean into the instruction. Conference spaces, office spaces are other things we're going to need to take a significant look at Richmond, and in a few slides Amanda will take you through a couple conceptual ideas for what we might do to support that space. Knowing that if Richmond stays a 21 classroom building, Richmond does not have flex space, right? It's locked into a 3 classroom grade level, and it wouldn't have that flex space to go to a 4th section should there be a hot spot or should there be an enrollment anomaly at a particular grade level.
I have a few questions.
Yeah.
So the first one, as it relates to some of our inadequate spaces, since you said that they're inadequate when you compare them to the elementary building standards that we developed?
I wouldn't say, they're meeting the minimum space standards. I would just say it's inadequate to some of the other buildings and inadequate to some of the collaborative space that might be needed for this model.
For multilingual?
Correct.
Okay, so there are some needs related to space and multilingual that we don't have.
Yeah, the collaboration space, yeah.
Okay. The other question I had, so as I think about, I believe it was said last week, we have 68 students that are bused in currently today to Richmond, and they would, for all intents and purposes, be moved out to wherever their neighborhood school is. Do we have the space, and is there an opportunity to, I don't know, draw the line and say the intermediate, so the 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade students, if they would prefer to stay at Richmond with their cohort that they've had probably since they started school, do we have the space to do that?
We wouldn't have the space, well, knowing that mobility is a component, all I can really say are these are projections, knowing
Right.
that mobility is a component with a cohort of students. I'd have to really look at the individual class sizes of those 3 grade levels. I'll touch on this a little bit later in the intra-district transfer. Might there be a portion of those students that we could accommodate at Richmond? Certainly. We would need to see how many of those families want that option to be considered, and then look at the enrollment across those 3 grade levels to see if we can accommodate that based on their existing enrollment and then what the additional students would do. Because what's different here is at Richmond currently, let's look at just 3rd through 5th grade. They have 2 sections of monolingual and 2 sections of dual. So they actually have 4 sections of 3rd grade, 4 sections of 4th. So we'd have to look at how those numbers play out to see if they could be consolidated into 3 classrooms and still meet the space or the class size guidelines.
But then we'd be overburdening the teachers. They'd be adding, it'd be larger class sizes, and we've already said that we're understaffed, right? So we're gonna be putting, if we were to take that approach, we would be making larger class sizes, right? Just to fit a space need there.
I guess I would counter to that, I would like to see that model out, because we have, even with our boundary changes and so forth, we have consistently given consideration. We want to cut it at 4th grade.
Sure, yeah.
We have consistently given that consideration, and I think it's potentially a tough situation for these students to then move to another school and leave their course. So that would be my only thought.
Yeah, we could certainly look at those numbers. I think, again, what Richmond doesn't have currently is that flex space. So we wouldn't have the option of going to a fourth section in any of those, of any of those grade levels.
And our rule has been, if it's going to bump up another section, like that's been the cutoff of allowing intra-district transfers into the building. Like that's been the rule.
Right, that certainly doesn't mean it can't be discussed, but.
It is in the agenda that you're going to speak to.
Correct. I will speak to that, yeah.
I have a little different take on the question. I'm looking at the numbers here, and we have a one-way dual language with some number of students who are brought into Richmond, and that consumes 6 classrooms. We have a projection that we will move all those students away from Richmond, so that's a net reduction in students, and yet we still need 6 classrooms. Help me understand why it's 6 and 6.
Because it's 6 grades 3 through 5 currently. So it's 2 classrooms per grade level. No K through 2 is currently at Richmond, whereas next year there would be like 1 class per grade level K through 5.
And for each of those classes, K through 5, there's enough Spanish language students for the in-classroom TBE model to take place at Richmond?
There is, and I'll touch about that on 2 slides. That is, you'll notice part of that recommendation is having the Davis students that are currently served in the one-way dual language program. I'm going to speak more to the space constraints at Davis as to why that is, but we certainly have the students to make a section per grade level for the in-classroom.
Okay, I'll save my next question for that Davis discussion.
Okay.
Then if I can ask, kind of tying in what Mrs. Fairgrave said, if we're talking about taking the students from Davis, and we're talking also about potentially keeping students who are currently there, keeping them together, that would not be a permanent situation. I'm gathering that neither situation would be permanent. The students coming from the Davis area, the Davis neighborhood, would eventually level out. Would that be, first of all, would that be the case, or would that be something we intend to do in perpetuity? And the other question then is, if that's the case, would that impact the ability to do what Mrs. Fairgrave is suggesting and keeping those students there? Assuming that that would be a 2-year, really a 2-year issue, I'm guessing, 2 to 3 years.
So what we would be proposing is that the current students would remain, all Davis students, whether you're full-time eligible for TBE or not, but moving forward, it would be full-time eligible students would be able to go to Richmond. They could elect to stay at Davis, but they could go to Richmond to receive that full-time TBE support, only your full-time TBE, because that's where the program is at Richmond. So if you don't need that support, then your neighborhood school is Davis. But in terms of, I don't know if this is in one of the slides, so if it is, sorry, I'm taking someone's slide. We will be looking at, for our students who exit the multilingual services, by the time, maybe they're in 4th grade and they exit, we can transition the student to remain at Richmond, but in a different classroom that's not the in-classroom program, and so that they would just be, they wouldn't have to change schools, they're just in a different classroom.
So I guess the question I'm kind of getting at too is the situation with Davis. That number then, that's something that would be done kind of in perpetuity, mostly because of space constraints at Davis and because.
What would be in perpetuity would be the full-time TBE.
Right. So, and that would just be only Davis students could opt in and no other.
That's the history of Davis and Richmond kind of
Right,
thing,
yeah, no, I understand that, so, okay, thank you.
Could you advance our slide? My clicker ran out of batteries or something. There we go.
All right, let's take a little bit of a deeper look at Anderson Elementary School. So, again, I'm going to qualify with these are just projections. And with the students currently being served in the one-way dual language program, we're anticipating approximately 30 students to return to Anderson Elementary School as their attendance area building. We then look at how are those 30 students distributed across the 6th grade. There are 2 particular cohorts that I'm taking a very close eye on. And that is the current third grade cohort going up to fourth grade for next school year. Currently at Anderson, third grade is a 3-section grade level, but they are projected to add 6 students to their fourth grade numbers who are currently being served in the one-way dual language program. If those 6 students do indeed come to Anderson, that will be a definite add of a section. They'll go from 3 sections of third to 4 sections of fourth. And then you're looking at our current first grade cohort. Currently have 67 first graders at Anderson, but they do have 10 students being served in the one-way dual language program. So we understand mobility is a factor, but if those 10 students return to Anderson, because it is their attendance area school, they'd be up to 77, which puts us in a little bit of a quandary with our numbers. You know, we're 5-6 months away from the first day of school, and we're already 4 students away from the cap. So we're trending toward possibly needing to add a section of second grade. So that would be the scenario that added 2 core classroom sections, with one of them being definite and one of them being probable, I guess I would land. So with that addition of 1, if not 2 classroom spaces required at Anderson, which is a 26 classroom building, we are going to be needing to make considerable considerations for what that might look like. And what do I mean by considerations? It could be a multitude of items. It could be looking at having art and music share a classroom space, knowing that those educators are only at Anderson 3 days a week. So you would have a 1 day a week where they overlap, and that 1 day a week, one of those educators would need to be on a cart. Not ideal, compromises the minimum space standards. Luckily, stairs are not an issue. There are some things you can do with scheduling where you can kind of stack some grade levels to where maybe the art teacher is only teaching K and 1 to make that a little bit more of an agreeable experience. Anderson has a staff lounge. That is the space of a full-size classroom. It's been a staff lounge for years. Could it be modified into a space? It's something, that's what I mean by considerations would need to be made. If you were to go to page 2 of our minimum space standards that we established, it does identify several roles who are, to meet the minimum space standards, they need 100 square feet. I will tell you right now, Mr. Jarrett, in his current space plan, because of his number of staff, he does have 2 unused classrooms, and those classrooms, let me walk that back. He has 2 classrooms that are not used for core or elective non-core purposes. And so what he does in that situation is he has a room where he dedicates to 3 of his resource teachers, and then another room that he dedicates to 5 staff members, 2 reading specialists, a math specialist, a newcomer specialist, which is 0.5, and in a Title I funded role. And a lot of that is due to inadequate office space. So there is a lot of cohabitating at Anderson Elementary currently. And then also those partnerships with facilities of what can we do with flexible furniture? How can we look at our spaces differently? How can we look at our cafeteria spaces differently to possibly create small group instruction time built into our day, knowing that it's going to be tight and a lot of allowances will be made for that to feel comfortable.
So, Jared, we talked a little bit about this during our many planning meetings too.
Yeah.
Do you anticipate that these enrollment changes will persist? These challenges will remain for the next several years? Do we see that it may wane a little bit?
Yeah, it's a great question. Anderson is the only attendance boundary that didn't change. And so we have a little bit more history of what to expect. This year, I could just do a comparison this year. From the first day of school until last Friday, Anderson has enrolled 17 students and has withdrawn 6. So they're at a plus 11 just for their enrollment since the first day of school. Definitely shows we are a destination district. We've had a net gain of 94 students have enrolled in D303 since the first day of school. and that's just for elementary. So we definitely are continuing to enroll. At Anderson currently, if the projections bear out, 4th and 5th grade will be the definite 4-section building. So, and we do see that. We see in our district a fairly significant jump across the board in 2nd grade enrollment to 3rd. There's usually about 100 student jump in our total numbers of 2nd graders. By the time they get to 3rd graders, there seems to be a significant number of move-ins, and then that continues to climb through 5th grade. So 5th grade this year is, by a fairly wide margin, about 50 students, our biggest grade level.
Can I just ask a quick question?
Yeah.
For clarification for myself and the audience, that's not 100 new students between 2nd and 3rd grade at Anderson. That's across all 2nd.
yes,
Okay, perfect.
yes.
That's what I thought. I'm just making sure. Thank you.
Would this be the appropriate time to talk about the access program? So where are we looking to move that to?
I would say no decisions about moving have been made.
Right.
This model, I'm not saying it couldn't work in this model. I'm saying,
That would be my follow-up. Is there a way that we could still maintain that program at Anderson? Or another thought, just brainstorming that I had, could we keep the current cohort at Anderson and do some type of hybrid where the younger students transition and eventually we phase out Anderson to another school? I don't know.
What does that look like for staff, though? Right? Like, is there dedicated staff to the younger grades, or are those staff members working with all the students?
so the classrooms are set up like at Anderson. They have a 2-3 classroom and a 4-5 classroom. And so that one teacher is in a classroom with 4th and 5th grade students. Another teacher is in a classroom with 2nd and 3rd grade students.
Okay. What about the management of the program itself, right? So we've talked previously at this table about the difficulty of having a program, especially the multilingual program, being under one of our buildings. And now we're talking about putting the multilingual program and the access program under the leadership of one building, right? Like, to me, that seems like a lot. And also, what does the growth of the access program look like for us?
Yeah. So full transparency, I want to make it about students, but
break it out however you
yeah,
need
that's, for full honesty, that's tough to put on the building principal. I think the role of Mr. Jarrett, but having 2 programs, because with each of these programs, especially with the model that we're recommending for the collaborative TBE, Anderson in that staffing model is going to get 6 or 7 additional staff. With programs comes additional staff. And that's not just for Mr. Jarrett's evaluations. I'm coming from space. The staff members need a place to work their magic with students. And I think that having 2 programs that require some of those space constraints, it would just be things to consider of whether or not other items such as art and music on a cart or giving up a lounge, like, could we do that for a year? Possibly. But I think there are significant space considerations and tightness, should that be the case.
I would agree. I think all of these things we've talked about are important things to consider. I would just, I guess, ask from my perspective that we look at all those things more intentionally as it relates to access. I am concerned that we have students that have had to, in that program, that have had to move schools multiple times in succession, and especially with the needs that they have. I think it's challenging for a general education student, and then it's compounded for these students. So in my view, if there is a way, whether it's transitional at Anderson and ultimately the goal is that it moves somewhere else, that would be for you to determine and recommend. But I would just ask that we really give serious consideration to that.
What we can do is come back with a full, if we were to say Anderson, knowing all of the things that Mr. Buxton just walked through, but it would take this, additional work. That's what I hear you asking for, is that we would come back on that aspect of it to say, here are a couple of the scenarios that we would walk the board through. From Anderson, what would that mean, to another school, what would that mean? What are the programs? What are the students who are in EC who would potentially find great success in our access programs? Where are they coming from? Because that's the other side of this conversation, is the continuation of young people in our access program. What does that look like for the K-5 environment? So we can bring that back to the board as we talk a little bit more around Anderson and other schools as well, so you see the options that I have available to you. But what we would also bring are additional costs that could potentially be added to that. That's what I hear you asking for.
Yeah, that's
Perfect.
exactly right. And if there's additional resources, how do we really look comprehensively at that to see what's the best call?
We can, just trying to think about, that's what I'm trying to think about, is that timeline on that piece. We're going to be meeting with the parents on March 19th, so I would think at that April, I'm trying to think about, do we have a business services meeting? March 20th. I think would probably be an appropriate timeline for us to come back to the board with those different scenarios, if the board's okay with that.
Does that impact, I know we had this discussion the last board meeting. Does that impact our ability to transfer staff if we need to?
With a programming change, that's going to be a little bit different, but I'm going to look over to Marcy around programming change. Would that be considered a transfer still if I waited till that March 20th meeting? But we can work with the association to have that piece, the access piece conversation on that March 20th date.
When you're
Maybe we
looking,
could just recap that for the folks listening at home, since they wouldn't have been able to hear Marcy mention
Oh, yeah.
that.
So there is still, even with a program move, Ms. Conlon, that is still a part of our transfer for our employees. So we always want to do that in a timely, respectful manner. But I believe further conversation with the board around the access program and what are different options will allow us to do that. And again, we'll engage with the Teachers Association on that aspect of the transfer piece.
Two things I want to add to that, that you bring back to us on the 20th, if possible, timing-wise. When you're looking at access and options, can you also include, when you were talking about EC, can you also include how, when we were talking about various boundary changes, we were wanting to be very intentional about not isolating staff so they had no collaborative partners? So could you also add that little tidbit in there? And then also, one more thing, when you come back to us again, I want to be sure you're talking about EC with regards to access. I also want to hear about EC with regards to multilingual. I assume that's all being factored in with the numbers that you're presenting, but I just want to be sure that I'm seeing the whole picture.
Okay, we can make sure that that is woven in there.
Thank you.
Sorry.
Last commentary on this, just as we discussed this, I know we're talking about not wanting to overburden Anderson, and I agree with that. I don't want to overburden any school, so as we're talking about the intentionality of this, there are two things that we need to understand. We need to make sure that whatever move we make for the access student has to be a permanent move for them. It can't be something that's they're going to move again next year and the next year.
That will be incredibly challenging. I'm just going to say it as Mr. Buxton beautifully said earlier, with an additional 96 students. 94 students who moved in. We continue to be a destination district. We continue to bring more and more young people and families to our community, and we are starting to feel that constraint, especially in that Coron, Fearson, Belle Graham, all those areas. That's where we still have some housing to go. So I always worry about saying permanent to any of our programs. I just would be very hesitant to be able to say that at this point. What we would love to be able to sit here and talk to the board and our community about is as we look at projections, that we're able to say we think we're feeling pretty comfortable in that 3 to 5 year timeline for something like that, and that's not something we've been able to do in the past.
That at least would be a great step forward. Too many times, and again, I want to be cautious that we don't find another school to overburden that already has multiple programs in it. So
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Before we, I'm just going to say this. Before we make a decision about and ask administration to not move students again, I would like us to go through the process that we've talked about examining the program, the whole program, the success of the program, and then this board as a whole can decide what the investment is. If it means that we build a permanent home for them at one of our buildings, I would like to have the data and the success metrics to back it up. Again, one of the things that I'm really challenged with in this conversation is we're asking now for a bunch of different options on this. We haven't examined this. We're gonna make spending decisions on this as well. It makes me very uncomfortable to do it because then again we have to go and have the same conversation and hear some of these voices again next year potentially when we come back and say, oh, whoops, we overburdened Anderson and we didn't get what we needed out of the ML students. We didn't get what we needed out of the access students. We did something wrong here. So before we do something like that, and before we find multiple options for this, again, putting us in a haphazard situation, I would like us to make sure that admin examines this thing fully, comes back to the board and says, here's what this program is meant to do for your kids. Here's what the success looks like. Board, please invest in this. Please invest in this in a space constraint and everything else. Like, I can't make a vote on this if I don't know what the success is of it. I can't also hear every single year coming back. I mean, I'll tell you, I've been walking for my campaign, and constituents come in and tell me, like, I'm sick of the drama of every year that I have to go through this. So that's something that I'm like, let's do this right, like we've been talking about.
I'd like to say something, okay, because you've all had a chance. I'm actually going to tie into what Mr. Lenz says. I am very concerned about our kids. We heard some really powerful things tonight. We have to take care of that. We have to figure out that we're not moving them again. If we move them to Coron, we haven't studied whether Coron's going to be full in 2 years. Mr. Lenz is right. We just went through a complete look at the ML program. I know I've talked to a few of you. You want to do this with special ed. I totally agree. We have to do that. We don't have time before March 20th to do that kind of program analysis. I would like to build on to Anderson because I think they're going to be full and it won't take very long. I also have a real hard time talking about a burden that comes to a school because a program came. Mr. Jarrett has already welcomed them. Norton Creek has they have great community and they have multiple programs as well. Our principals do handle those things well. I agree with Mr. Lenz, we need to make sure we do it right, but I also agree with the parents. We've got to figure out something so that they aren't moving their kids. Can we figure it out? Can we work with staff so that they can phase it out and then we know where they're going. I'm concerned that we're throwing things at the wall again, asking administration to make decisions that we don't have the full.
No, go ahead.
Just to clarify, I'm not suggesting that, but we do have an immediate need to make a decision on where the program goes. So I would hope that some of the considerations we've talked about would be part of the discussion that they walk through to come up with what their recommendation is as far as where the program sits. My ask, again, is that we look seriously, that it stays at Anderson. And maybe that is transitional until we're able to do the whole ROI analysis and we identify what the program looks like long-term. We need to have the program. So it's not a matter of whether the program exists or not. It's a matter of where is it most appropriate to go. But we do, like it or not, we have an immediate need to figure out where this goes and where we can serve those children best.
I agree. I happen to agree with everybody, but I agree. I think we have to do something immediate, and I think we have to hear that the families are tired of their kids being.
And that's all I'm getting at, is that I see the same people that I've talked to for 3 years now that are tired of moving. So I'm not asking, I'm not asking for any guarantee other than we need to look at. These are aspects we need to consider as we're doing this. As we put it into a school, I don't want to say, well, we're going to do this here for a year. I want to look, and Dr. Gordon said, we can look at something where we might be able to look at a 3 to 5 year. That is one of the things we do need with that program, is some permanence and consistency for those students. And as for the term burden, it is a burden when you have multiple programs. I'm not talking about any specific program, but it is a burden when you have multiple programs that are not the core education programs. That becomes it's distracting and taking a principal in multiple directions, and I don't want to see that either.
Yeah, I think long-term, for any program to be able to stay at one building, be it at the elementary, middle, or high school, it's going to need construction. Because of where we're at with our facilities and the growth in our community that continues to happen, we're going to have to look long-term to say, okay, for an access program at X building, we may have to decide that we need to add on 2 to 3 additional classrooms just for that. That would bring permanency to what we're talking about long-term for a program. But those bigger conversations about how do we keep a program longer than a year, 2 years, or 3 years, is to say, we're going to dedicate X dollars to this solution.
So we have a conversation coming up in the next couple of slides about facility improvements at Richmond. There's nothing included in the deck in this material about facility additions in Anderson. And there's a 2-classroom plan here. There's potential to spend capital to create classrooms at Anderson. It's a feasible thing. So as we have the conversation, if there's feasibility to investing in that building, if that makes sense, it's not like Fearson where there's a total inability to build on that building. And so when we have the next conversation about it, that the potential to look at the physical layout of Anderson, I think, is there.
Yeah, Anderson, I'm not saying no to it, but Anderson also brings space challenges as well. But those are pieces that we can bring to the board, kind of that background on each of those sites, which are sites that we think would probably be more appropriate per the site. But we can absolutely do that for the board. Okay, so let's go to Davis. I think that's where you're at.
Yep.
Could we slide over to the Davis slide, please? Thank you so much.
So I want to just pull out Davis specifically. I did not address this at last Monday's meeting. Talk a little bit about the partnership of why Davis students would be partnering and going to the in-classroom model. And I'll start just by going through the number of students at Davis that are currently being served in the dual language program. Again, these are projections, but approximately 25 students would return to Davis Elementary School for next school year. That is K through 5. that are currently being served in the one-way program. When you put those students, see where they are across grade levels, apply it to their current enrollment. Definitely going up a section, not nearly as in-depth with the number 2 as Anderson is. I'm confident that they'll stay at 1, but you know, there is a possibility that they would go to a 2, but they have a little bit wider of a gap to go with enrollments before they tip that threshold of needing to do a 4th section. But definite increase of 1 is where I'd be confident. So let's talk about what that means. Currently, Davis is a 25 classroom building, but they do have 31 classrooms on its site currently, with 6 of them being the mobiles, and with this model, we're looking to phase the mobiles out. This year, mobiles is where all of the specials are taking place. It's where AT Math takes place. It's where band orchestra occurs, and it has some offices out there as well. So when we eliminate that, yes, Davis would be losing 6 classrooms from the K2 dual program, but with the students coming back, going up 1, if not 2. Where there's just not the flexibility at Davis to get as creative as you might get at other schools with that flex space is 16 of their 25 classrooms are accessed via stairs. So when it comes to that guaranteed and viable curriculum, it's not just the inconvenience of art on a cart, we're now talking about the student experience. A student who's getting art or music in those 16 classrooms, the integrity of what they would get would be compromised because, let's be honest, we're not coming up those stairs with the instruments, the art supplies, and things like that. Some of our schools are able to very much use their LRCs in a very creative and flexible manner, whether that's to do a section of AT art, whether that's to do some small group instruction. Davis's LRC, that is not a viable option to do any type of programming in the LRC due to you get to 16 classrooms by walking through the LRC. So, and another thing that I would pull out that I think is interesting, when it comes to the office space allotment, of the 11 elementary schools, Davis has by far the least square footage to be able to accommodate office space, small group space. And so when you think about should the students be returning to Davis, that would put them at a collaborative TBE model where you're needing some of this flexible space, some of this pull-out space, auxiliary space, that just currently cannot happen in its current footprint with us taking those mobiles offline.
Questions on Davis?
This is both a comment and a question. It sounds like the families who are boundaried into Davis would be the only group that we're recommending take on the burden of going to a school that's not their K-5 local school. Is that about right?
Yes.
Dr. Taylor-Moore, you said earlier that anybody participating in that kind of program would have the opportunity to decline that level of service. And if that's the case, if all 25 of those students were to say to D303, hey, we like the K-5 configuration, we'd like to be in Davis, what's the approach for managing that situation?
Yeah, the approach there, it is something that Davis gave up this year, so it's something that they're used to, probably don't want to be used to it for long, but they did give up their lounge to be able to fit all of our classrooms. If you remember our conversation from last summer, where we didn't want any of our core classrooms out in the mobiles, we were able to do some things with the lounge to fit all 25 classrooms in that 25 building. So that would be the option that we would look, is just keeping that classroom offline for the lounge, or the lounge offline for the classroom.
But in terms of staff count, we would have to replicate the staffing model that you've proposed for Munhall and for Anderson. Is that about right?
Yes, the number of native Spanish speakers would be above the 20, so we would then look at that collaborative TBE model.
Okay. Next slide, please. Okay. Amanda.
All right. Yeah, so as Jared discussed earlier, Richmond, as it currently is, has an adequate auxiliary spaces, especially to support the proposed TBE program. So while the current footprint allows for the adequate amount of spaces appropriate for the TBE, additional space is needed to help make this model sustainable long-term. So as you see up here, multiple iterations of an addition, conceptual addition, have been explored for Richmond. They've all centered around 2 classroom additions, as well as additional bathroom space, some open flexible spaces, as well as conference and office spaces. It would be, well, as I mentioned, there's enough classrooms for the core curriculum and special elective classes. It's anticipated that these 2 classrooms would be constructed as a flexible classroom, most likely being used as office or group, small group instructional spaces. So in addition to this addition, there would be some adjacent interior renovations that would be needed to make this renovation work. And if you go on to the next slide, you'll see that it's the intent with the interior modifications that we would seek to add some additional support and pull-out spaces, similar to the examples you see above here, that would allow for more one-on-one or small group instructional spaces outside of the core classroom. And if you move to the next slide, well, utilizing numbers that we've already taken from previous estimates for the larger addition we evaluated at Richmond, we're able to extrapolate those numbers and apply those towards a 2 classroom plus some additional support spaces addition. And in total, with the addition, interior renovation, site work, and other needs, we totaled about $4.2 million for this work. It is anticipated if we move forward at this time that this addition would be ready for school start of 26-27.
Can I ask a question? Sure. So can you just compare and contrast? So before, at one point it was on the table, we were going to add 6 additional classrooms to Richmond, right?
Yes.
And it looks like our need has remained constant. So walk through what the thought process is to go from 6 to 2.
Sure. So the 6th classroom was designed was to support the full 2-way dual language at Richmond, whereas here with just the in-classroom TBE, the amount of classrooms that we have right now suffice for the classroom spaces. However, because of the additional office and collaborative spaces that are needed, we could design an equivalent addition that is open office space, but we'd prefer to design it as classroom space to allow for that more flexible growth in the future to be able to readapt as needed over the years.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Thank you. And then finally, as you'll see on the next slide here, there will be some other considerations. If we did move forward with this addition at Richmond, I would take into account some other capital improvements that are known in this building and adjacent to this work. And really to take advantage of economy of scales for these other projects that are already on our capital plan. So looking into moving up those schedules to, one, again, as I mentioned, take advantage of economies of scales, but also limit the amount of summer disruptions to the building.
Board, any other questions for Amanda or anybody else?
I think it's worth noting that we have more than one building that has been added on to, and I think Munn Hall is one, Anderson is another, that you don't see, you go in the office and that was not the office when it first was originally built.
This would not be the first addition for Richmond. Yeah.
Are the capital improvement projects included in the 4.2?
No, they are not.
Okay, do you know about how much that?
Off the top of my head, I don't have all those numbers, but next month we are bringing an updated capital plan, and depending on the conversations that we have here, the updated capital plan will reflect the projects that would be proposed as part of that.
Okay, thank you.
Did I hear you rightly that it was 26-27 school year?
That is correct. There may be some smaller construction things that we'd be able to do this summer to offset the load for a fall start this next year, but the major addition would be for 26.
Quick follow-up question here, because it sounds like based off of what we talked about with the increased enrollment that we're already experiencing, volume changes at some of these schools. Can we make this work right now? If we implement this plan and the board comes to consensus, can we make this work with either temporary adjustments to our spaces, permanent adjustments to our spaces? Because to your point, we will not see this space until 26, 27. So, and to the board has really mentioned on a number of occasions the concerns about Anderson specifically right now. So can we make this work? Is this something that's going to come back and bite everybody if we implement this plan Can we do this?
Yes, we can do this. It will be tight, but I believe ensuring that our staff, if we were to think about Richmond, that they knew this was being built, that it was coming, that we could work through it. There are some spaces within work. A lot of it will be in the hallways and those areas. At Anderson, again, it can be done, but it will be incredibly tight for next year. As Mr. Buxton said, it's really around the staff where we're going to be very tight, and then again in those collaborative spaces if we remain if the access program remains at Anderson. If it does not remain at Anderson and moves to a different school, Anderson then becomes, it allows Anderson School to kind of breathe and to be able to do all of the work with the multilingual program and the general education programming that we have. But across the board at both Richmond and Anderson, if we kept everything as it was, as administration's recommending right now, it can work in both, but very tight for, again, Richmond, knowing that they will see an end to that site. That will work. I think where, again, we have the most concern is at Anderson.
So just to follow up on that question here quickly, it sounds like we've seen a lot of enthusiasm from the people who have presented at the building level, from the administration. Is this a challenge that these individuals are willing to endure as we get this right across the district, right? Is this something that we can expect them to bear as we implement this process?
Yes,
Yes,
I
they
believe
are
so, because,
enthusiastic.
as two of the leaders who are sitting back here, three, I will say this. We asked that question. We asked the question to the leaders to say, should we pause? Should we wait a year and just get it built? Everything stays the same. Keep portables at Davis, all of those things. We said, we're willing to put that on the table. To a person back here, and you are more than welcome to come up and say what you said. They said, this is better for students. Why would we wait? Am I correct in my summation of your accounts by the three of you? They're giving us an affirmative nod back there. So they believe in it as well, because I really do believe that this multilingual plan is the plan for our students to have the most success possible. You saw the implementation criteria, you saw the academic criteria, the thoughtfulness, the work behind it. We really do believe that our students and our staff will thrive in this model. It will be tight next year. It will be. But I think from the voices of our leaders who felt like this was the time, and I gave it to them. I said, here you go. Here's your out. Here's your ability to tell us no. The leaders of the building said, we need to do this. This is the right thing for our students. Mr. Buxton, anything else you would add?
No, I would just add, and just to add some specificity to when you say it's going to be tight. At Anderson, the proposal is a collaborative TBE model, right? So in that collaborative TBE model, the classroom teacher is native English speaking with a bilingual specialist coming in to provide that Spanish instruction. So being very thoughtful and creative with the scheduling of where that instruction can take place, free from distraction to the greatest extent possible. And I think that, we can acknowledge with Anderson needing to use those classrooms for some of their office space, because some of their designed office space may not have the biggest square footage. You're begging that question of how can we design that classroom to create those visual barriers, because there is going to be small group instruction, some in a classroom that might be occurring in Spanish and some in a classroom that might be occurring in English. But I was in the room, and I've heard it multiple times with a lot of eye contact. This is what's best for our kids. This is what we believe our students need and deserve.
All right. The fully loaded cost, what we did was add in this $4.2 million into the Mr. Attaway added in the fully loaded cost into our ROI process, meaning the $4.2 million in construction. Mr. Attaway?
So just as a reminder, the charts on the slide in front of you include the fully loaded cost per pupil for each of the options that we considered. For each of the options, we calculated the implementation cost or the upfront cost to start the program, and then the run cost or the cost to operate the program following implementation in both years 1 and 6. Only the implementation costs have been updated on this slide, and the changes include the construction cost that we just discussed, potential additional furniture purchases, and then the cost to demolish the mobiles at Davis. Next slide, please. So the charts on this slide look at those same projections a slightly different way. These charts include the total direct costs, so not broken down on a per pupil basis, with a designation of funding source for implementation costs. So as we discussed at the last meeting, these models do not allocate the entirety of the construction expenses to the program, since Richmond and the other elementary programs do benefit from the addition of classrooms. So we've allocated 25% of the associated estimated construction cost to each of the 3 models here. Then beyond construction and furniture, all other direct expenses will be paid from the education fund going forward.
Board, any questions for Mr. Attaway? Okay, and we'll dip back into a conversation because we have not heard enough from Mr. Buxton tonight. It'll be important to us to hear again, but we touched on this earlier around the intra-district process and transfer process. Mr. Buxton?
Yeah, we know that question's coming up for our families, both for our families across the district, but also particularly in the multilingual program. So just bring ourselves back to some of the changes that we made last school year. The window will open May 15th, and it will close July 1st, and therefore decisions will be made as soon as possible into July. If you recall, the spirit behind that change was to try to capture more spring and early summer move-ins. So we are prioritizing the ability for students to go to their attendance area school. We also made a change that once a waiver was granted, that approval remained in effect for the duration of their elementary year, so they did not have to apply every year. Last year, we did choose for a path of transparency, and on May 15th, we gave kind of a one-time snapshot of where enrollment was at that date, and therefore we publicized the number of classroom spaces available by school, by grade level, to just give parents a little bit of an idea of the amount of vacancy that exists in the school that they might be desiring, so they know to do an option 2 if they would like. As far as why I'm kind of pulling out from this particular topic is now we have a year under our belts of our new attendance boundaries, and we've gotten a chance to see how those projections from RSP are aligning with the actual real students that are coming to our doors. And so being that our enrollment has continued to grow, we are over 5,000 elementary students for the first time in about 11 years, I think. We are likely going to need to be more restrictive in the approval process than we were last year. Because as I said, the students kept coming even after the start of the school year. And we want to just make sure that we are putting a little bit more of a buffer in place for what that current number is, so it can absorb some of those late summer, early fall move-ins without running the risk of doing administrative placement due to overcrowding, which I'm still proud to say there are 0 currently.
Any other questions on intra-district transfer?
I want, just to tie, I'm wondering if we need to have a review of how, not now, but at the end of the school year, how it all went. How did we land after a year with redistricting? what we nailed, what we didn't expect?
We can absolutely do that. I know we
Not
gave.
for next
Yeah,
week.
no, I know we gave the board a little preview about two months ago, somewhere around there. But we can do an end-of-the-year review probably late June.
Mr. Buxton, would it be true to say that admin need not be more restrictive, but only that the number of spaces available under the same rule set is fewer because the projection of new students coming into K-5 is that much higher? Is that about right?
You said it very well.
Okay. Next slide. No. Well, on the next slide that I had was our recommendation, which is the same recommendation for multilingual students transitioning away from the one-way dual language program to a collaborative TBE model and an in-classroom TBE model.
So that you would equate that to option, which option on the table?
Thank you. One, thank you.
Just a procedural note for us before we move off of the discussion portion of the agenda. Just a procedural note before we move along, which is we have a resolution for action tonight. I will open the floor for that resolution. If folks are uncomfortable voting, there is the opportunity, of course, to propose an amendment to delay that resolution to a future meeting. So.
Could I just ask, I've already talked to the superintendent before the board meeting, but just to put it on, one of the things I wondered if you could check into is the possibility of students who are native Spanish speakers, when they go into middle school, 7th and 8th grade Spanish, if the state would allow us, or if we could pound on their door, for students who might proficient out of that first year of Spanish. My assumption would be that many would be able to, if they're still speaking and doing writing, but they get a high school credit for that, and that might help them when they get to high school. So I don't know if there's, if we allow students to.
We can look into that. We'll definitely do that work for you.
Mrs. McCabe, are you thinking of something almost like a CLEP test that you'd have for college to test out of a course? Is that
The
the
only
idea?
course I ever tested out of was college level, because I knew how to play the piano already. But that idea that, yes, that you already have a skill that you don't need to hear again.
Thank you. We will check into that.
Let me offer the floor before we move off of this agenda point to see if there are other
Just my commentary on this, I have a favorite economist. I'm like that. My favorite economist is Thomas Sowell, and he says, anytime you're going to make a decision, you have to ask 3 questions. Compared to what? What hard evidence do you have, and at what cost? And I think right now we're looking at compared to what? Compared to the status quo. I think what we're looking at here is better than the status quo. What hard evidence do we have? I think we've been provided with more hard evidence for this than we have for any other program that we've seen. There are still questions, of course, but, and at what cost? Well, the cost that I'm seeing here is considerably lower than the cost that we saw before. So I think those 3 questions have been mostly answered satisfactorily to me. I'm not sure about the rest, but those are 3 guiding questions I think need to be asked every time we do anything.
I would just, say that my biggest concern on this is the space. And, this board did a lot of really good work, really hard work with the reboundaries and what we set as the space standards and everything else. I do appreciate you taking the question to the building leaders and having them here tonight to kind of give the thumbs up, right, about what we could do to make this work. I think that the program itself is the right call. And again, the amount of effort that went into this, like, I hope you guys liked this process, because for my seat, like, I want to see this more. And I think this is probably some of the best work that I've seen come to the board table with the analysis, with the collaboration, just not just amongst administrators, but with staff and the teachers and everything else. I think that is, I think, the movement of our district, and being thoughtful about it, so we don't have to discuss this in a, hey, why did we make this decision way back when, right? This gives us a clear roadmap. It gives us implementation guidelines and everything else. I really appreciate that effort. Again, just for me, space is the biggest thing that I'm worried about.
I think one of the things I would ask when we do the process, I would agree with a lot what Mr. Lenz says, that this is a unique, for those of us who've been around a while in education, this is a really unique process, and very grateful for all the work you've put into it. That we put into the process a little more voice of teachers and more voice of parents. Right now you have a special ed families who are knocking at our door. It would be nice to include them at the beginning of the process, which I think may happen on March 19th, but I think we heard from our bilingual families that they felt left out until the very end. So if you can, knowing you, Dr. Gordon, that's an important component of your work, is having those conversations. So I would want us to add that. Are we talking about whether we're ready for the resolution? Is that what you're looking for, Mr. Lackner?
No, I'm not looking for anything.
Because I do agree with Mr. McNally that I think those questions have been answered. Mr. Lenz is exactly right. I think if our principals say we will make it work, their teachers will come along, but it will be tight. And if we have a plan that we will stick to, no matter who the people are around the table, because we could have a completely different board. If we're committed to that and we've signed, sealed, and delivered that work to be done, I think then people can breathe. So I could vote for it.
Okay. Oh, Mrs. Bell, you have the floor.
I was just going to say that we've talked about AROI quite a bit, and I definitely appreciate the way this has been collaborated with the board, with staff. We definitely need to include parents much sooner in the process, and I know this was one of our first really big AROI, and just something that I really want to make sure that we're reminding the general public is that this isn't about penny pinching. This isn't about what does the program cost. It's about, is a program effective? What are the students involved? And then we get to cost. So just, I've had that question quite a bit, and I want to be really clear that the program comes first, not the dollars. It's not that dollars are not important. It's that we're looking at this specifically because of the program. And I would like to second whoever said about special ed being something that we do that with next or very soon. That would be a really, really fantastic idea. We need to do that. The other thing I will say is, just for clarification, if in fact we do end up going with this, making a decision today, we're not making a decision necessarily about access today, correct? Correct. Okay.
Correct.
So when I'm hearing from you, Mr. Buxton, that our staff says we can do it, I just want to make sure that I wasn't hearing like, yeah, we're just going to go ahead and move forward with something with access. So this decision is not access related. We're going to talk about that after the 19th, correct? Thank you. And I'm ready to go forward if that's what we do today.
Seeing no other comments, we can move to item 7 on the agenda, the consent agenda. Can I have a motion to approve the consent agenda, items 7A through 7K?
So moved.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Lentz. Mr. McNally, is there any discussion? Ms. Marsan, please take the roll.
Mrs. Bell?
Yes.
Mrs. Fairgrave,
Yes.
Mr. Kuschert,
Yes.
Mr. Lentz,
Yes.
Mrs. McCabe,
Yes.
Mr. McNally,
Yes.
Mr. Lackner.
Yes, the motion passes 7-0. That brings us to item 8, our 4 action items. 8A, can I have a motion to approve that this school board adopt the resolution authorizing and directing the president and secretary to give the temporary licensed employees listed on said resolution written notice of this board's decision to not reemploy said licensed employees for the 2025-26 school year?
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. Where was the second? Thank you, Mr. Lentz and Mrs. McCabe. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, Ms. Marsan, can you please take the roll?
Mrs. Fairgrave,
Yes.
Mr. Kuschert,
Yes.
Mr. Lentz,
Yes.
Mrs. McCabe,
Yes.
Mr. McNally,
Yes.
Mrs. Bell,
Yes.
Mr. Lackner.
Yes, the motion passes 7-0. That brings us to item 8B. Can I have a motion to amend the previously adopted grade level configuration plan by striking and rescinding the portions of the plan that called for housing the dual language program at Richmond and planning for construction of 6 classroom addition at Richmond, and to approve a revised plan to transition from the one-way dual language model to in-classroom and collaborative transitional bilingual education models, and to discontinue the use of 6 mobile classrooms at Davis, starting with the 25-26 school year?
So moved.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Kuschert and Mr. McNally. Is there any discussion?
The only thing I wanted to say that I forgot to say before was that, to be very clear, that I don't think I'm not speaking for the board, but I don't believe any of our board members believe that our students are a burden. So I want to make sure that we're clear, that the public knows that we take these decisions very, very seriously, and we try to work very hard and together, and we want to make the best decisions for our kiddos and for our staff. So it's not a burden. I think the burden for me personally weighs on just making the right choice, because these are difficult decisions. So I just want to make sure that that's clear. Students are not a burden.
Hearing no other discussion, Ms. Marsan, will you please take the roll?
Mr. Kuschert,
Yes.
Mr. Lentz,
Yes.
Mrs. McCabe,
Yes.
Mr. McNally,
Yes.
Mrs. Bell,
Yes.
Mrs. Fairgrave,
Yes.
Mr. Lackner.
No. The motion carries 6-1. That brings us to item 9 on the agenda for information. There are 4 items included in the packet that are for information only. They are the D303 financial report, the Mid-Valley financial report, the Freedom of Information Act requests, and district enrollment. And that brings us to item 10, new business. At this time, do any board members have new business that they'd like to introduce tonight? Hearing none, that brings us to end of the meeting citizen comments. And seeing that we have none, that brings us to item 12. Can I have a motion to adjourn the March 10th, 2025 school board meeting?
So moved.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Lentz and Mrs. McCabe. Ms. Marsan, can you please take the roll?
Mr. Lentz,
Yes.
Mrs. McCabe,
Yes.
Mr. McNally,
Yes.
Mrs. Bell,
Yes.
Mrs. Fairgrave,
Yes.
Mr. Kuschert,
Yes.
Mr. Lackner.
Yes, the meeting is adjourned at 8:21.